then he receives a note. Josif Vissarionovich, why so slow, drop by drop? Give it all now. An old woman barely manages to get on board the bus. Thank God, she says. And a young Komsomol member turns to her and says, there is no God, Babushka. You should say thanks, Stalin. Oh, you're right, my dear. I'm old, not very educated, but tell me, son, God forbid, what if Stalin dies? Whom shall I thank then? Well, then you can say, thank God. A similar sentiment was expressed by a young boy from an orphanage when some high authority visited. Tell us who your father is. Stalin is our father, answers the boy. Who is your mother? Mother is our solid motherland. Who do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an orphan. Now, so let's go back to our joke under a discussion about the collective farmer. So obviously, this joke belongs to the second type about Stalin and some kind of imaginary imprisonment of Stalin. But at the same time, Stalin is presented as some kind of mythological figure, as some kind of god in the Kremlin. So the opposition here lies in this symbolic ambiguity of the Kremlin in the language of the time and in the images of the time. Kremlin in the 1930s becomes both the center of Stalin's cult and at the same time a prison or camp. By 1935, the 5 points stars were installed in the Kremlin, on the Kremlin towers, to replace the double-headed eagles of the Tsarist times. And the 5-point stars completed the metaphor of the Kremlin as a place bringing happiness to all Soviet people by shedding the rays of its lights all over the country. And people sang, "Our happy country is rejoicing. All of the Kremlin stars are bright rubies. And in the big world, in a faraway land, these stars could be seen during the day and in the darkness." Indeed, in the popular, official culture, I should say, but popular too, in the mass songs, for example, of the 1930s, the stars of the Kremlin replace not only double-headed eagles, but real stars in the sky. And the stars have begun to shine more brightly, and our pulse is speeding up. Stalin looks up with a smile. He's just an ordinary Soviet man. He looks upon us with a smile. So if we formulate some kind of master plot in the text of the songs featuring Stalin in the Kremlin, it would be some sort of communication between people and Stalin. People sing and dance, fly airplane, conquer the North Pole, collect crops, build the country, and from the perch on the hill in the Kremlin, above the earth. Stalin listens to people's songs, looks at them with a smile, waves his hand at them, extends his reliable hand, he watches them. Мы знаем, мы помним, чье мудрое око следит за расцветом Москвы. Actually, I'm trying not to use any Russian. But in the 1930s, the Kremlin sort of serves as the part of this myth, and Stalin in the Kremlin. But 1930s, of course, witnessed not only the elevation of Stalin's cult, but the peak of the Great Terror. And the very shape of the Kremlin, with its high walls and towers and military guards, also could evoke the image of a prison, could suggest a prison. Obviously, later in Brodsky's poem, there is line, the Kremlin looms like the zone, like the prison zone, as they say in miniature. Кремль маячит, точно зона, говорят в миниатюре. And in one of his short stories, Varlam Shalamov speculates about the mass killing of the prisoners in Kolyma region in the 1930s. And he says, and I quote, and what served as a model for Moscow architecture, the watchful towers of the Moscow Kremlin or the guard towers of the camps. And so obviously this image of the Kremlin as a prison serves as a background for Shalamov's powerful metaphor. Brodsky and Shalamov wrote much later than the 1930s, but projected their images on the whole Soviet period, but also on the 1930s. But there were earlier indications of these parallels. In 1935, Requiem piece, Anna Akhmatova refers to the historical Kremlin wall as a weeping wall, a site where the wives of the Streltsy, the Peter's guards, wept during the execution of their husbands. And in her 1940 poem, Stancy, Akhmatova posits the image of the Kremlin as the site of murder within its walls. One cannot live in the Kremlin. The reformer was right. The place is still overrun with microbial swarms full of ancient furry. В Кремле не можно жить, преображенец прав. Там древней ярости еще кишат микробы. Actually, there are two more lines. Boris's animal fear, the wrath of all the Ivans, and the impostor's arrogance in place of the people's right. Бориса дикий страх, всех Иоаннов злобы и самозванца спесь, взамен народных прав. Now let us return to our joke about peasant observing the Kremlin. So it ends with the son of a bitch will never get out of here, And in this line, in our joke, this line in this joke refers obviously also to this imposter from Akhmatova's poem, the imposter still living in the Kremlin, namely Stalin. This way, this line in the joke turns the idyllic world upside down by Peasant's suggestion that Stalin will never escape. And in this context, walls and guards and Stalin, they characterize the prisoner's world. And one can imagine some kind of Sots art painting, so contemporary painting, in which the ancient Kremlin, shining with ruby stars, would be surrounded by barbed wire, and Stalin's beautiful white